Therapists of Reddit, what was your biggest "I know I'm not supposed to judge you, but holy shit" moment? Okay, real therapists here, I've got one. Some of my clients are shockingly bad at giving themselves credit. Holy shit. Like they might get a nearly straight A GPA in a brutal major while battling depression, or write a literal novel, or raise a kid as a single parent with low income, or build new relationships after being burned, or cope with OCD well enough to hold down a job. And they'll talk about themselves as if everyone on earth is better than them, as if their accomplishments are worthless. And I know it's because of depression or anxiety or another condition, but I'm often stunned by how differently I see them compared to how they see themselves. I work in mental health and have worked in acute and crisis settings for the majority of my career. The most notable event I experienced was when a young person had presented with significant ongoing suicidal ideation who was going to deal with a lot of shit. I spent a lot of my time with them, mostly de-escalation and working out what the plan should be moving forward. One of their parents came in a little while later, and I had the opportunity to speak to them about where their child was and what had been going on, with their consent, of course. Midway through me trying to explain some of the psychological constructs and the way the parents could help, they said to me, "Is this going to take much longer? I have a show to go and watch." All I can say is, I never judge my patients. I have never walked their path or viewed the world through their eyes, but the people around them who perpetrate the suffering of the people I work with through ignorance, malice, and selfishness, I judge them. During my training, I was asked how you would feel if a client were to come to you and admitted they were a pedophile that was on the edge of committing seriously horrific acts. Could you see that person as another human being that needed help, or were your personal feelings about the abhorrent behavior too strong? This factor led some people to not continue my course on to the next level, but it really illustrates the level of non-judgment needed in this field. We all have our own personal feelings, of course, but these get talked about in supervision. I work with youth and adolescents who have anxiety, trauma, and/or depression. Some of the kids I worked with had some pretty severe attachment issues. Regardless of this, I never thought I'd have to seriously explain: 1. You can't just buy a straitjacket for your kid. 2. Feeding your kid ultra-spicy ramen each night instead of the meal everyone else is eating isn't specifically defined as abuse, but you have to understand the emotional abuse that this causes. 3. Your kid isn't trying to kill you because they stand in your doorway at night crying. That's likely because they're scared of their traumatic nightmares, but feel like you will just yell at them if they wake you up. Edit. Thank you all for your questions and support. This case has really helped to shape my approach to therapy and has highlighted the importance of healthy communication between parents and kids. My number one tip: don't let someone else tell you how to feel or think. If someone says, "You're angry with me," or something to that effect, ask yourself if you really are. If you're not actually angry, then don't spend a second more on it. A lot of kids or family members get hung up on trying to justify their own actions according to someone else's perception. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I'll tell you I've never judged my patients. The world is so full of judgment, and it's my job to objectively look at someone who's suffering and offer them empathy and a path towards healing. The one thing I've judged is the situations that people survive and continue to live their lives. I've worked with torture survivors, survivors of genocide and famine. I've worked with people whose entire villages were wiped out because a warlord wanted the water well that was sitting in the town. It always gives me pause in terms of the anguish some people face and their resilience. So if I have one message, it would be in the words of R.J. Palacio: be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle. I'm a dude. I was brutally raped multiple times between the age of 7 and 10. My one and only attempt at trying to get help from a therapist was one of the most awful experiences of my life. I attempted to get help in my early 20s. Upon first going in, I was asked what had happened to me, after explaining a basic outline of the abuse. I could already see that she was very dismissive and seemed not to really believe me. She then asked about my relationship status. At the time, I was in a long-term relationship with a woman who had 2 kids, boys. Upon finding this out, she immediately demanded the names and address of my girlfriend, names of the kids, and said she would immediately be getting in touch with social services to ensure that I wasn't abusing them. I can't put into words just how much that destroyed me mentally, that she could obviously see something in me that I couldn't see, that somehow she was certain that I would be an abuser. I started to cry. She told me to pull myself together. I also can't put into words the pathological, visceral hatred I have for pedophiles and rapists. If I could get away with murdering them, I would. I would never, ever, ever inflict the absolute nightmare I went through on any child. Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week, she canceled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an orgy, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone. Clinical psychologist working primarily in forensics here. This means my clients are usually involved in legal proceedings, family court, juvenile court, criminal court, etc. My job is usually to evaluate or provide treatment. I'm not here to judge, that's the judge's job, but of course I have my thoughts. I am usually impressed by the justifications people make for shitty behavior. The one that irks me the most is when parents manipulate their child against their parent. I have to do therapy for a 5-year-old who says she doesn't want to see a parent because they haven't paid child support. Excuse me? What 5-year-old knows, understands, or needs to be worried about child support? I was once in my psychiatrist's office, a bi-monthly 15 minutes med check. She asked me what was going on, more as conversation. I told her that in the last 6 weeks, my 3 elders, aunt and 2 uncles, I was guardian conservator for had died, one right after the other. My wife had a heart attack, my daughter attempted suicide, and my mom broke her hip and had laid on the floor for a week before being found. She drank and ate from the dog bowls. I got that call within 10 minutes of setting up the last funeral. She stopped the meeting, got on the phone with a therapist in the office next to her, and had her postpone her next meeting to speak with me. I was so effed up I had no idea. I think she saved my life. Can I answer from the other side? I had something close to a mental breakdown after a painful breakup. Started seeing a therapist. It was going more or less well. At one point, I had a sort of revelation about all my bullshit and about my own responsibility in the whole mess. So next session, I'm actually thrilled to share this with the therapist about how I finally see a bunch of my own problems in the way I interact with women and which caused a relationship that wasn't really healthy from the get-go. I'm halfway through trying to explain this and the therapist goes, "Oh, women are weird." So that was that. I never went back. F that guy. I feel like a lot of the comments saying that they never judge their clients might be working in voluntary services or they've been very fortunate in their client base. Judgment isn't an inherently bad thing. It's how we know that murdering people is wrong. So when a convicted pedophile client told me nothing gets me going like a pair of little girls' worn panties, you better believe I judged the F out of him. I continued to work with him and I treated him with compassion and respect because he's a human being worthy of both. I did my job because I'm a professional, but I can't honestly say that I didn't judge him. I judged that he should never be around children. I judged that he is not ready for change. I judged that his access to his own daughter should be closely supervised. That's a lot of judgments. Understanding your own inherent biases and how they influence your work is a very important part of training and practice. Patient side here. I had been seeing a therapist for a few months to help with chronic depression and self-harm with some pretty intense suicidal ideation. I had tried Suprax in the past, didn't like the side effects and put it down, but I was ready to try something new to supplement therapy. Everyone within earshot was calling Wellbutrin a miracle and lifesaver, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Since my therapist couldn't prescribe drugs, I got an appointment with a psychiatrist. My first appointment, I explain what I've got going on, what I'm doing to work on it, and what I'm looking for in seeing him. I do a pretty good job holding myself together in public. I dress myself, I hold down jobs. At that point, I lived on my own, now living with my partner. All in all, I've got a well-polished mask. I guess it's too good because pretty early in our session, he looked at me and said, "I don't think you're depressed." "Bro, this is the first time we've met. I've been here for 20 minutes and you're ready to reverse my diagnosis? Cool, bro." Once had a patient whose wife shook their baby to death. He wanted help reconnecting with his wife. At the time, I was a young father of a newborn myself, and he triggered a lot of fear in me for my own child, a deep loathing of his spouse, and pity, the how pathetic kind, for the patient. I tried for 3 sessions, met his spouse and everything before handing the case over to my supervisor, who knew about my initial reactions and tried to help me through it. Unfortunately, it ended up being more about my feelings than his, and I was new to this profession at the time. These things are expected to crop up from time to time, but I was still taken aback by my own reactions. ITT, too many GD responsible professionals. I came here to read the salacious stories of how some docs went ham on patients and lost their certifications. Instead, all I've gained is even more respect than I already had for the backbreaking and sometimes thankless hard work these individuals do every day. Work I could never do, not with any consistency anyway, responsible jerks. I do acute pediatric inpatient behavioral therapy. Has never happened with a child and never will. Parents, on the other hand, can be real pieces of shit. And the way they treat or abuse their children, then throw them off on us and scream, "Fix them." I'm a big burly guy and I've cried many nights over this. Well, I quit my last therapist because I made him cry uncontrollably. He tried not to, but he just couldn't hold it back. I felt guilty and won't see him anymore. I think he may have lost a child before. I described watching my aunt grieve over his son's body. I felt so much pain losing him, but was explaining how watching my aunt was dramatically worse. The details about her is what made him lose it. I could tell he was reliving something inside his own head. Not a therapist, but a patient. Me and my fiancé at the time went in to see if we could figure out how to make things work after he hit me. After our history came out and I divulged his infidelity, etc., the therapist basically said no, there's no hope. You need to get help for yourself so you can get the courage to leave and end this. I was angry at the time, but both therapists knew there was no point as he was screwed up as it gets. My professor once shared what a patient said that made her quit her job. I didn't rape my daughter. She liked it. The daughter was 6. She couldn't take it anymore. She worked in a rehabilitation center for people who have been sentenced for serious crimes and were forced to get mental help. Really difficult job, and this pushed her over the edge. Not a therapist, but in healthcare. 2 things. A, this post is stupid. No therapist is going to divulge their patient's secrets. That's not how it works. Even suggesting this may make people have second thoughts of getting needed therapy. B, no matter how messed up you think your life is, most therapists, I guarantee, have seen worse and won't even bat an eye at your trouble and will devote much of their heart and time into treating you and your mental health. I've worked with many therapists, psychiatrists, and psych APRNs. They are 100% all great people who have a special kind of personality and heart towards their patients. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and press the like button. Bye.